A man stands in yellow flowers, gazing at his beloved girl. Many fell for this film, just from one shot, Big Fish, one of the world's most romantic movies, 8.8 rating, a must-see in life. Old Edward is like that. He loves water, loves swimming, and soaking in the bathtub. Just dazing there. Besides loving water, old Edward loves storytelling. He has a tale told hundreds of times about catching a fish when young. A legendary fish that lived 60 years, incarnation of a drowned thief. Young Edward had a whim, used his gold wedding ring as bait, indeed caught the greedy big fish. But after catching it, Edward couldn't bear to let this unique fish die, so he squeezed hard, pushed out his ring, then released the big fish. On that very day, Edward's son was born. The child was named William. He loved hearing Dad's fantastical stories, but as he grew older, he thought Dad was making things up. As an adult, these stories annoyed him. He grew distant from his father, their longest Cold War. 3 years without a word, until one day, son got Mom's call, Dad had cancer. He took his pregnant wife, boarded a plane home. On the way, William felt conflicted. He watched a wakeful child making hand shadows. In the cabin light, he recalled his childhood. Back then, Dad, in similar light, told him a story. When Edward was 5, he and 4 friends sought a town which, legend said, through her right eye, one could see their death. They reached her door. None dared enter. Edward alone volunteered. He knocked. The witch opened, startling Edward, but she didn't flee. Edward politely asked if his friends could see her eyes. The witch agreed. She followed Edward back. Before 2 friends, she lifted her eye patch. Chubby saw his fate instantly. It was the appearance of grey hair. He climbed the ladder and fell, gasping for breath. Xiao Zhuang saw himself in his youth. When he was in college, suddenly had a heart attack, couldn't even put on his pants, and hiccuped. The 2 kids turned and ran. But Edward wasn't afraid. He even sent the witch home. Before parting, he offered to see his own death. He said, "When you know how you'll die, it means other dangers can't kill you." The witch lifted her blindfold. Edward watched calmly. The suspense of this story. Edward never told anyone. Many years later, terminally ill, he lay in bed, saw his son return from afar. The old man still calmly said, "Don't worry, I won't die like that," helpless and speechless. Dad was so sick he couldn't even drink nutrition shakes. Yet he still bragged. He didn't argue with Dad. Left after coming out, he passed by his old room. Looked inside, memories flooded back. As a child, he had chickenpox, bedridden. His dad sat by the bed, telling him stories. He comforted him, saying, "Don't fear being bedridden. Your dad was bedridden for 3 years. That's because others grow slowly. I grew up instantly. My body changed so fast. Edward needed machines to help his rapid bone and muscle growth." Edward lay there for 3 years. His only activity was reading 1 page about whales. Made him ponder deeply, triple or quadruple its size. This simple idea made Edward realize his ambition needed a bigger stage. After stabilizing, Edward explored his limits, sports, business, academics. He excelled at everything. Soon after, he became the town's finest. Until one day, a giant came to town, stealing farmers' sheep. The endless thefts terrified the people. No one found a solution. At this time, Edward stepped forward, volunteering to negotiate. People thought he'd die. No one stopped him. So Edward went to the giant's cave, called out loudly, offering himself as sacrifice. Edward extended his hand, let the giant eat his arm, but the giant pushed him away, started sharing his troubles. This guy wasn't a man-eater, just a troubled soul. Always hungry since childhood, panicked with hunger all day, had to steal sheep to eat. Edward began advising the giant, "Maybe you're not too big. The town's just too small." He suggested leaving together for the big city. "We big folks belong there," the giant agreed. And so, amid townspeople's cheers, Edward dressed the giant civilly. They set off for a brighter future. 2 roads led to the city, one new and wide, one old and abandoned. People said the old roads haunted, best avoided. But Edward was intrigued. He threw his luggage to the giant and he agreed to rendezvous on the other side. Then go alone and explore the old way. The further you go, the more you go inside. Sure enough, it's getting more and more terrifying. Eerie and treacherous. Dangerous everywhere are spiders and hornets. But Edward didn't stop, because he had heard a word. Good things are grinding. I don't know how long it has been. His eyes suddenly brightened. The land is poor and lonely. Deep in the forest lies a peaceful town. There is a row of shoes hanging at the entrance to the town here. It seems that it is not an empty town. A mayor ran out to meet him. "Say, this is the town of Fengdu." Asked Edward's name, then I looked at the visitor list. "Tell him you should be here, but you're too early. Could it be that this is heaven?" Edward was greeted warmly. Here's one more. Edward was an old poet he once knew. He's been missing for years. Couldn't have imagined being in this town all the time. A little girl suddenly stole Edward's shoes. He ran to the entrance of the town. Shake It Hard hung Edward's shoes on a rope. Edward didn't know what that meant, but people reassured him that he was fine. Anyway, here the grass is soft. No shoes are fine. Edward was left behind. Gradually, he discovered the town of Fengdu. Impact on people. The poet lived here for 12 years. He only wrote 3 lines of poetry the townspeople sing every night. Gather around and dance together. Immerse yourself in the never-ending. Edward finally couldn't take it anymore. He offered to everyone to leave. Everyone was shocked. It's so nice here. Why go? Edward says the world is so big. I don't want to stop yet. So Edward walked barefoot. What this story means is the town heaven or hell in the end. Perhaps this town is a metaphor for the lure of abundance. It brings frivolous pleasure to everyone. If you indulge in it, you'll forget things that make sense, forget yourself, why you came, where to go. This historia tells us, if you're still young, you have to be sane, even if it hurts. Also, stay away from temptation. Edward left the town rendezvous with a giant friend. The two moved on. They passed through a circus, so we went to see a show together. The finale was a giant. Everyone was shocked by his size. Only Edward frowned relentlessly. That's it, when he was a friend. A true giant walked in. The audience was silent for a moment. Even the circus owner was stunned. He immediately made a decision to sign a contract with Giant. Thereupon, the giant found his own business. Meanwhile, Edward also met the love of his life.
If you liked it, give it a like. If you didn't, change the test. Love you.